The CDC, or the US Center for Disease Control, recently made some public statements that might give you a chilling perspective on the state of the US, including the opioid epidemic that's ravaging the country. This data it's really just tragic. Everything about this is tragic. The statistics show that America has a growing and an aging population. At a statistical level, young adults are getting married later in life. They're buying a home later in life, if they're buying a home at all. They're postponing having kids, if they're going to have kids at all. But one thing that they're doing earlier than previous generations is dying. And some of the increasingly common means of death are suicide and drug overdose. The CDC reported that younger age groups, and particularly middle-aged people, are dying so often that it's affecting the statistics on US life expectancy. It's bringing the country's average life expectancy down a non-trivial amount. For decades, life expectancy in the US was on an upward trend, largely thanks to increasing wealth, increasing improvements in medical and surgical technology, and better drugs. But in 2015, the trend peaked, and life expectancy fell. In 2016, it stayed about the same, but in 2017, life expectancy dropped again. The suicide rate in 2017 was the highest that it's been in 50 years, at more than 47,000 people. A CDC official named Robert Anderson was quoted as saying, "We've never really seen anything like this," unquote. Alongside the rise in suicides is a rise in overdose deaths, which is over 70,000 for the most recent year. It's more than a 30% increase since 1999. Dr. John Rowe is a professor of health policy at Columbia University, and he described this apparent trend by saying, quote, "Maybe it's starting to slow down, but it hasn't turned around yet. I think it'll take several years," unquote. In other words, what he's trying to say is that the rate of increase in suicides is starting to slow down. But make no mistake, the rate of suicides is increasing year after year, and it's pretty terrible. The numbers are really high, and unfortunately, they match or even exceed that of other modernized places with really high suicide rates, like Korea and Japan. In a very closely related topic, overdose deaths from opioids skyrocketed, as did those caused by fentanyl. Fentanyl is an extremely potent drug that's being cut into cocaine and other stuff like pills and Molly that you might snort. And while it gives you a powerful high, you're really rolling the dice with it. A dose of fentanyl no larger than a grain of rice is enough to kill you. So it's no surprise that ODs from this stuff have skyrocketed. This is clearly a health crisis, and the explanation that the experts give is brutal. Do you remember the statistical trends that I was listing off at the beginning of the segment? Unsurprisingly, there's more trends going on than just postponing getting married and having kids and buying a house. There's other trends like wealth inequality, which is getting worse. Social mobility is ossifying, to the point where today's young adults are the first generation in American history to be poorer than their parents. I remember reading an article from a year ago talking about how Canada had greater social mobility than the US did, and so Canada was actually the place to live the American dream in the 21st century. And in America, good jobs are hard to come by, and wages for most people have been stagnating, while the cost of living has continued to rise. And perhaps most notoriously of all, mental health problems are becoming more and more common, and yet the mental health problem remains largely unaddressed on a systemic level. Dr. William Dietz is a disease prevention expert at George Washington University, and he said the rise in drug overdoses and suicides is due to hopelessness. He said, quote, "I really do believe that people are increasingly hopeless, and that leads to drug use. It leads potentially to suicide," unquote. Unfortunately, this tracks with the data, which has shown that most suicides aren't from people with mental health problems. Mental health is a big problem, and it really does need to be addressed, but the data shows that mental health may not be the root cause of this most recent rise in suicides and drug overdoses. For a while now, experts have cited the worsening economic prospects for workers and young adults And the highest suicide rate in middle-aged adults, those aged 45 to 64, would suggest that this demographic is being hit hard by the job loss and the money stress that's becoming so common. On top of this, you have the totally irresponsible distribution of opioid pain pills that has created addicts by the tens of thousands, and this rise in drug addiction is unsurprisingly followed by a rise in overdose deaths, in crime, and in suicides. People are stressed, they're depressed, and they're looking for an escape in the form of drugs or even suicide. The totality of this problem extends far beyond mental health and touches on institutional issues like our healthcare system, our legal and punitive system, and even our culture, which is becoming increasingly atomized, narcissistic, and individualistic. This is a problem that extends far beyond biology, and it's certainly beyond my pay grade. I hope solutions are found for these problems, and soon, but it won't be easy. We're talking about large-scale systemic problems that will require large-scale systemic reforms, and that is never easy. It really pains me to say it, but these problems are almost certainly going to get worse before they get better.